Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Allison Satter, and I'd like to welcome you to the SWIFT webinar on creating memorable presentations. We're so glad that you could join us today. We want to start by saying that this webinar was initially created as a resource for Professional Learning Institute presenters, but we hope that even if you're not presenting at the SWIFT National Professional Learning Institute, that you'll still find some valuable information from this presentation. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few of the logistics. For this webinar, we are only providing online access, but if you have any feedback or questions throughout, please feel free to list them in the chat box and we will attempt to address them or refer back to them during the question and answer portion. We will save about the last 15 minutes of today's webinar specifically for addressing any questions you have for our presenters. And just so you know, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on swiftschools.org after the presentation. So Jessica and I are your presenters today, and Jessica and I both work for the Swift Center as project coordinators, where we are often asked to present at different conferences. But so some of what we learn from doing those presentations, so we're going to share some of those ideas with you. But most of what Jessica and I have learned about presenting, we learned in our former role as elementary educators. Jessica and I both worked in both general and special education roles, and I think if you can learn how to engage elementary students, you can learn how to engage just about anybody. So we're going to be sharing some tips with you that we applied in both of our roles. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So to begin with today, we want to learn a little bit from you about what you hope to learn from this presentation. So we're going to put a little poll, and for this poll, we're asking, what do you hope to learn from this webinar? So do you most want to learn tips for how to make your conference presentation more engaging? Would you like to learn how to access tools to use to engage conference participants, or do you want to learn more about adult learning principles? See a few responses coming in. It's the verdict. Oh, it's kind of going back and forth. Yeah, between two. All right. I actually kind of thought that was surprising. Oh, nope. It's shifting again. So okay. it looks like we have people that are interested in all three components, which is good because we're going to share some information about all of those. Some people are kind of changing their mind, it looks like, as it goes. But it looks like most people are interested in learning specifically about tips for how to make the conference presentation more engaging, which is good because that's, I think, where we're going to spend most of our time and focus in on today. So, to start, we're going to play a little video just to get things started, and hopefully after the video is done, you'll learn a little bit about why we chose this to start our presentation. So just enjoy.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, the Great Depression, passed the, the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deep into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer Curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics, voodoo economics.
Okay, so that was just kind of a funny video, but we did have a purpose for showing it to you. So I think we can all agree, hopefully not, but I think most of us have been in a presentation like this, or maybe a class like this, or had a teacher like this, where you weren't fully engaged in the content and nobody's really participating, and you feel like the professor's just up there saying, Bueller, Bueller, is anybody, is anybody listening? So we chose this video sort of as a hook for our presentation and to show you kind of the why of our presentation, why we think it's really important that when you're presenting that you make sure that your content is engaging all of your presenters and that you use dynamic ways to do that, so that you don't have people in the audience really not getting anything from the presentation and not really walking away with any of the content that you're planning to share. So hopefully this can be a reminder for you about why this topic is important, and we're going to try to be the opposite of Ferris Bueller's teacher.
Let's hope. That's our goal for today.
Let's hope that we are able to accomplish that. So just to start with, we're going to go over our agenda for today. So our agenda, we're going to try to do two things. We're going to start by telling telling you what sticks with today's learner. So you might have noticed the top the title of our presentation is make it stick. And that's all about trying to create memorable presentation so that the content that you're presenting actually um, sticks for the people that are learning it. And then, so not only are we going to say what sticks with today's learners and really talk to you about some of the research behind that, we're also going to talk to you about how to make it stick. So we're going to give you some tools for how to do that.
Okay, great. And I see that, Kathleen, if you can hear us, I saw that you raised your hand. And as Allison was typing in the chat box earlier, because of the feedback and sound and audio for the webinar, if you want to type anything into the chat box, we'd be happy to respond as we go. Yeah, sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Oh. I think we predicted that for ourselves.
That was a great transition because speaking of the chat box, we really want to encourage you to help make this webinar interactive. So we want you to use the chat box throughout. Please feel free to let us know if you have any questions or if any of the content that we present really relates to you, or even if you have additional tips to share. Jessica and I are not the end all be all on how to create dynamic
No way.
presentation. And we know that you guys have tips that maybe we didn't even think of. That you could share with our audience members. So feel free to put those into the chat box, or even if you have any stories about some of the best presentations that you've ever been to and what made those really good. Feel free to share those in the chat box, and we can refer to them throughout.
Great. All right, so what we're going to cover first today is we're going to discuss what makes participants in the 21st century want to attend a presentation or a conference, and how we can use adult learning principles to guide how we present information. So during this time, as I'm presenting today, I want you to think about how you've experienced these principles as an audience member. So when you've been in a presentation, how have these principles played out for you as a participant? And then I also want you to think about how you can alter your presentations to best meet the needs of adult learners. Let's get started. So first, we're going to do another quick poll. We want to know what you think participants most want from conferences today. So the choices are: they want to learn the latest research, participants want to network and meet other people, they want to learn new strategies to help make their own job successful, some way to use that when they go back home, or to visit a new city. So what do you think participants want from conferences today or presentations?
So far, this one's looking like a landslide.
Yeah, everyone is weighing in that they think participants want to learn new strategies to help their jobs be successful.
So nobody else signs up for conferences based on the city that it's in. That's good to know.
That's good to know. That's good to know, because I know I definitely have taken advantage of visiting new cities for conferences. So,
but it looks like our participants are looking for strategies
100%.
to really make their job more successful.
Excellent. Good. Well, hopefully our presentation today will help make your job more successful, however you present information. All right, well, what we want to do is just give you kind of a little bit of information. CEC, the Council for Exceptional Children, does a huge conference every year, and they've been doing some research around this whole idea of 21st century adult learners and why participants want to come to conferences. And what they have found is that participants used to come to conferences or presentations to get the latest research, but technology has changed all of that. Now that people have instant access as soon as an article comes out, or as soon as there's a blog or a podcast, there's all different ways to access information in ways we didn't have 20 years ago. So now, when participants come to conference, they already know the latest research. They know all of the current strategies and ways in which they can do their work. So their needs in attending your presentation have changed. And the two things that they want to know are, one, you guys were right on. They want to know how the content is applicable to their personal role. How can they take what you're teaching them back to their home and into their job and make it more relevant for them? And the second one is they want to network around the research and network around the content. So have you seen scenes like this at conferences that you've been to recently? People want to interact with each other and they want to be able to use their technology. So we as presenters have to find ways to do two things. One, bring those hallway conversations into our presentations. We don't want people only sitting in the hallway so that they can interact. We want to find ways that they can interact within our presentation. And that gets to the second point, which is offering peer-to-peer learning opportunities. We want to make sure that people have the opportunity to network with others, but also ways to make that content applicable to their role. So how do we do this? Well, this is the hard part. The first thing we can do is look at it adult learning principles. And we're going to take the next few minutes to review these. So one thing we know about learning is the one who does the talking does the learning. You got it. And this picture shows a traditional model of presentations. A speaker talking to an audience about something, and the audience members are all sitting forward listening to the presenter. But to be maximally effective in today's society, we must flip this from presenter-centered presentations to participant-centered presentations. And I know as well as anybody that this is really hard to do. For me personally, it's really hard to let go of this. I teach a college class, and my tendency is to think that I need to lecture in order to ensure that my students learn the new content. And not to mention, I love to talk, so you get a microphone or an audience in front of me, and I want to be the one to talk. However, I have really worked hard to try to step out of this box and let go of that, needing to be the one talking all the time, and create presentations that center on my audience members doing the talking. Either that's with a partner or during a group activity, and I find that when I've been doing this, people are much more engaged. But I also get a lot more positive feedback that relates back to the two things that we said people want to get out of a presentation. Just last week, those of you that were at the National Leadership Consortium meeting for SWIFT, I did a presentation where we worked really hard to flip that and make it where most of the presentation was group activity and learners engaging in the content. And what I found is that afterwards, people didn't just say, wow, we really liked your presentation. They said, I really loved your idea about this, and I'm going to take it and do my own professional development. And so that's making it applicable to their role. So letting go of that control and letting go of that microphone really does allow participants to engage and take away more from your presentation. So the second learning principle is motivation. And we all know that motivation plays a huge role in creating sticky presentations. I know we all have experience with this. Adult learners resist material that is forced upon them. Or if we just say, it'll be good for you to learn this. You just should want to know this. I think all of us can say that we prefer to be led by a carrot rather than a stick. If we go back to the horse analogy, I that I would rather be the presenter find a way to connect the material to me so that I'm motivated to learn it, rather than someone just saying, well, you have to learn this because it's good for you. So it's our job to create motivating presentations. So real inner motivation stems from adults understanding why they should learn something, as we talked about, and the benefits that we're going to get from learning it. So our job as presenters is to find ways to connect the learners to the bigger context of what you're presenting. So help them understand, how will this help me when I go back to my job? How will the information that you're presenting connect to me in a way that I can take back with me? So an example of how you can do this is at the beginning of your session, create a hook. Help them understand why this is important. For example, the video we showed at the beginning, it's kind of a funny way to help you get hooked into why creating engaging presentations or sticky presentations is better than having audience members falling asleep or bored during your presentation.
Which hopefully nobody's doing right now.
Exactly, yeah, I can't see anybody, so we're hoping that's the case. And speaking of boredom, once participants are hooked, It's important to state the outcomes of the agenda of your session at the beginning. Allison and I did that. And use positively stated objective. So tell your audience members what they can learn or what they are going to get away from your session. But we also have to be flexible and assess the current needs and wants of the group. So as Allison and I did that poll at the beginning, find a way to assess, even if it's just raising of hands, to find out where learners are. And the reason why this is important is because if you overestimate their current level of knowledge, it can result in them being confused and they don't understand what you're talking about. But at the same time, if you underestimate, it can result in boredom. So you really have to find that sweet spot between participants being confused and participants being bored. And I think based on the two faces we see here on the screen, we can all relate to this as presenters, and it's never fun. When you see those faces, you're like, oh, I got to find a way to connect with my audience. So when planning your presentation, consider ways that you can modify the content up. So if you're finding that they're bored, include ways that you can kind of crank it up a bit, or even slightly down a little bit if you're seeing that your participants need something a little bit more simple if it's too complex for them, for their level. And in just a few minutes, Allison's going to talk about creative ways to do that. Yeah. So stay tuned. All right. Another learning principle is reinforcement. And we all want to be cheered on, don't we? And as Allison was just saying, in fact, because we can't see anyone, this is exactly how I'm picturing our audience here today reacting to just the stellar presentation.
I'm certain.
I'm certain
that's exactly what it looks like.
This is exactly the audience that we have. I'm sure of it. So anyway, in your presentations, you want to find ways to encourage positive interactions between your audience members and the content. So, for example, encourage audience members to share their ideas, their stories, their thoughts, and then reinforce them for that. Again, they want to be able to network, so let's encourage that. And they also want to be able, we also need to find ways to connect it to their everyday work. And so when they're able to share a story that relates to the content, it's more likely that it's going to stick. So be sure to encourage your participants when they share, and this will make other participants feel confident to speak up as well. All right, next learning principle is retention. Retention of knowledge is directly linked to the first time participants learn something. So if they don't learn the content during your presentation, it's likely they're not going to retain it later. So if they don't leave your session connecting to it, it's likely they're not going to retain it over time. But the good news is the amount of retention is directly linked to their ability to practice during the learning process. So for you all as presenters, provide opportunities for your participants to give something a try. Actually try the content out that you're presenting on. Give examples of how they can practice learning after the session. So when they go back to their roles, have them list or talk about how it connects back to the work they do at home. Have them talk with a partner or write it down and make a commitment to what they're going to do once they go back home. This will all help them retain the knowledge once they leave you. All right, transference is the next adult learning principle. And this is one of the highest levels of learning. So if they're able to transfer the knowledge into a new situation, which is what we've been talking about, then it's likely they're going to remember it over the long term. So we want participants to be able to take the content from our sessions and apply it to new settings. Just as I was talking about my presentation last week, I felt like people were already telling you about how they were going to transfer their knowledge to new situations, which is great. So as a presenter, we want you to interact with audience members along the way. So as you're presenting, give them opportunities to interact with you about the content, and then that way you can correct any mistakes that might be out there. And there's lots of ways that you can have participants interact during your presentation. So one example is Jim Knight, during his coaching conferences, which are fantastic, he has these red, yellow, and green cards on the middle of a table. And when he asks people questions, he can say, okay, if you think the answer is something, hold up your red card. If it's answer B, hold up the yellow card or the green card. And that way he can get a quick assess of the audience. Everyone's engaged. And it's a way to check that they're understanding so that they can have an increased likelihood of transference later on. All right. I'm going to pass it over to Allie. Now we're going to talk about strategies. We got the principles out of the way.
So Jess did a great job of telling us sort of why this is important and what you need to do. And I'm going to attempt to talk to you about how and give you some tips and tools for how to do that. I will just mention now, there are going to be a couple of tips that I share that have utilize your cell phone. So if you have a cell phone, you might be getting it out. If you have a barcode reader on it, you could be getting that app ready too, because we're going to be doing one activity that uses that. Okay, so to get started with, one tip that we have is to really involve your learners in the planning and implementation of your activities. Now, that's sometimes easier said than done, though, because it requires you to have more than one plan, a plan A, B, and C. But it's really important, if you can, beforehand, to reach out to your audience members and try to gather some information about what they're wanting to learn from the content, and then you can kind of really tailor your content to that. Or even if you don't have that luxury of reaching out to them beforehand, you can always poll your audience at the beginning of your presentation and try to learn really what they want to focus in on, and then you can adapt your information as you go. So this requires you to have kind of a plan A and a plan B and a plan C, but it's really not that hard. I don't know, it was a few weeks ago, Jessica and I were at a presentation that we did together, and we had different sections of our presentation, so kind of a part 1, part 2, and a part